Sham Sharadava Nalalidaloka Pranaya Karuna Gana Ganatum Saradava Nalalidaloka Praptasya Kalyana Gurnana Vasya Rashi Charanara Vrindam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Vande Guru Charanara Vrindam Mahaprabhu ki Tananita Gita Vaditra Madhyam Manasarasena Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Shri Vigrahara Dhananityanana Shringaratanama Niramajanado Tasya bhaktam sa niyunjatopi Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Chaturvedha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Satana Truptan Haribhakta Shanga Kritva Trupti Bhajata Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Radhikama Gavayara Para Madhurya Leela Gunarupanamna Pratikchanasa Danalalupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Nikunja Yono Ratikeli Siddhai Jayali Bir Jukti Apekshaniya Akrati daksha ativala basa Bande gurashi charanara vrindam Sajadharitena Shamasta Shashri Ruktastatava Vyataiva Sadvi Sajadharitena Shamasta Shashri Ruktastatava Vyataiva Kintu Praborja Priya eva tasya Bande gurashi charanara vrindam Sa prasada Bhagavat prasado Yasya prasadam nagati kutapi Yasya Dayam stuvam tasya yasatri sandhyam Vande gurashi charanara vrindam Dayam stuvam tasya yasatri sandhyam Vande gurashi charanara vrindam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitina Mine Nama Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunavari Pachatari Shatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hariyaraya Namah, Krishna Jadavaya Namah, Jadavaya Madhavaya Kesavaya Namah, Gopal Govindaram Shrimadusudam, Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shiropa Sanatan Vataraguna Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Radha Nila Madhava Radha Nila Madhava Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Shri Radhe Nitai Gaura Haribo Haribo Haribo, Nitai Gaur, Haribo. Nitai Gaur Brahmananda.
Namamishwaram Sachidanandarupam Lasat Kundalam Gokule Vrajamanam Yashoda Bioloka Ladhavamanam Paramnishta Madhyanta Todrutya Gopya Rodantam Muhurnitra Yugmam Rijantam Karamboja Yugmena Satakanetram Muhushwasakam Patirekanka Kanta Stitagraivada Mudaram Bhakti Bhadam Muhushwasakam Patirekanka Kanta Iti Trikhalila Virananda Kunde Swagoshami Majanta Matyapayantam Tariye Shitajeshu Bhaktajitadvam Puna Prematastam Sata Vikti Bande Varam Deva Moksham Na Moksham Varimva Nachanyam Vrineham Vareshadapiha Iram Teva Purnata Gopalavalam Sarame Manasya Virastam Kimanye Iram Te Mukham Boja Makyantanilai Vitam Kuntalai Snigdaratas Chegopya Muhushchumbitam Bimbaratadaramne Manasya Virastamalam Lakshalabhe
Muhushchumbitam Bimbaratadaramne
Namo Deva Damodara Nanta Vishnu Prasida Prabhu Dukha Jala Vimanam Kripa Drishti Vrishyati Dinabatanu Grihane Shamamajam Eriakshri Desya Kuveratmajo Bhadha Mudrai Vayadvad Vayamochito Bhakti Bhajo Kitau Cha
Kuveratmajo Bhadha Mudrai Vayadvad Vayamochito Bhakti Bhajo Kitau Cha
Tata Prema Bhaktim Swakame Prayacha Namokshe Graho Mesti Damodareha
Tata Prema Bhaktim Swakame Prayacha Namokshigraho Mesti Damodareha
Namaste Sudamne Spuradipti Damne Tvariyodarayata Vishvasya Damne
Namaste Sudamne Suraditi Damne Tvariyodarayata Vishvasya Damne
Namo Radhikaya Twadiyai Priyaya Namo Nantalilaya Devaya Tobhyam
Namo Radhikaya Twadiyaya Namo Nantalilaya Devaya Tobhyam
Namamishwaram Sachirananda Rupam Lasat Kundalam Gokule Vrajamanam
Namamishwaram Sachirananda Rupam
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Jayo Vishnupad Paramahansa Parajik Jasta Tarasatura Shri Madhis Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sri Gaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasati Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Samakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Shri Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Ganga Maya Ki Jai Jamuna Maya Ki Jai Samavela Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Damodarastakam Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavana Ki Jai. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Patita Pavan Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutali Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitanam. Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavali Paskati Rasatane. Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Narasimhaya
Namaste Narasimhaya
Praladadayine
Radhanadayine
Hiranyakashipurvaksha
Hiranyakashipurvaksha
Shilatankanakala Narsimho Parato Narsimho
Nisingha Bharato Nisingha
Yeto Yeto Yami Tato Narsimho
Yato Yato Yami Tato Nisingha
Mahe Narsimho Hrudaye Narsimho
Nisingha Hridaye Nisingha
Narasimhamadim Sharanam Prapadye
Shrilamadhiranam Prapade
Avakara Kamalavare Naka Adbhuta Shringa Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubhrangam Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare
Vakara Kamalavare Naka Adbhuta Shringa Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubhrangam Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare
केशवद्रीता नरहरि रूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे
Keshavadrita Narari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare
जय नरसिंह देव जय नरसिंह नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव
नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव
जय भक्ता प्रहलाद जय भक्ता प्रहलाद जय भक्ता प्रहलाद जय भक्ता प्रहलाद
प्रहलाद जय भक्ता प्रहलाद जय भक्ता प्रहलाद जय भक्ता प्रहलाद
नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल
गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल
जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद
जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद
जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव
जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव सिंहदेव भगवान की जय वृंदाये तुलसी देवाय प्रियाये केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति प्रदि देवी सचरताय नमो नमः वृंदाये तुलसी देवाय प्रियाये केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति प्रदि देवी सचरताय नमो नमः वृंदाये तुलसी देवाय प्रियाये केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति प्रदि देवी सचरताय नमो नमः जय तुलसी देवी महारानी की जय
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः तुलसी
नमः
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः तुलसी
कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाओ हे अभिलाषी कृष्ण सेवा गाओ हे अभिलाषी राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाओ हे अभिलाषी
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाओ हे अभिलाषी
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः जे तुम्हार शरण लोय तार वंश पूर्ण होय
जे तुम्हार शरण लोय
तार वंश पूर्ण होय कृपा कोरि गोरो तारे वृंदावन वासी कृपा कोरि गोरो वृंदावन वासी मुराए अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास मुराए अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास नयने हरि बो सदा युगल रूप राशि नयने हरि बो सदा युगल रूप राशि नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रियरे नमो नमः तुलसी
कृष्ण प्रेयसी
दान दो साकीरानुगत करो Guru Sakirangata Kara Devadikara Diye Koro Nija Dasi 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 Dina Krishna Das ko je namora hoy Dina Krishna Das ko je namora hoy Shri Radha Govinda preme sada jina bhasi Shri Radha Govinda preme sada jina bhasi Namo Namo Tulasi Krishna Priyasi Namo 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 Nani Kani Chapapani Brahma Hatyadikani Cha Tani Tani Prana Shanti Pradakshina Pade Pade Tani Tani Chapapani Brahma Hatyadikani Cha Tani Tani Prana Shanti Pradakshina Pade Pade Tani Kani Chapapani Brahma Hatyadikani Cha Tani Tani Prana Shanti Pradakshina Pade Pade Tani Kani Chapapani Brahma Hatyadikani Cha Tani Tani Prana Shanti Pradakshina Pade Pade Tani Kani Chapapani Brahma Hatyadikani Cha Tani Tani Prana Shanti Pradakshina Pade Pade Tani Kani Chapapani Brahma Hatyadikani Cha Tani Tani Prana Shanti Pradakshina Pade Pade Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo Hare Ramo 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare Jaya Tulsi Maharani 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 Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Vrinda Devi Vrinda Devi Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Tulsi Devi Maharani ki jai Vrindaye Tulsi Deva Priyaye Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Padi Devi Satyavata Namo Namaha Vrindaye Tulsi Deva Priyaye Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Padi Devi Satyavata Namo Namaha Vrindaye Tulsi Deva Priyaye Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Padi Devi Satyavata Namo Namaha Vrindaye Tulsi Devi Maharani ki jai Saraswati Devi Guru Chani Visesa Sunyavadi Paske. O Tulasi, beloved of Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire is to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you has his wishes fulfilled. Bestowing your mercy upon him, you make him resident in Vrindavana. My desire is they also grant me a residence in the pleasure groves of Shri Vrindavana Dham. Thus, within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of cowherd damsels of Raja. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maidservant. This very fallen lowly servant Krishna prays, may I always swim in the love of Shri Radha and Govinda. Tulsi Devi Maharani ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vestaya Buddhi Samadhi Bhakti Smartaya Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Chani Visesa. Shri Chaitanya Siksastakam ki jai. Cheto Darpana Marjanam Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam.
Vidadatulam pato matprana natastu saivana paraha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishna Kam ki jai. Nama Mahavananaya Krishna Prema Pradayati Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Ramani Gauratu Shri. Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart with the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life with repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we're always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings. And thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested with transcendental energies. There's not even a hard and fast rule for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself the Lord on the throne street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yes, some or other, I am falling in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, or will my eyes will be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? Or will my voice choke up, and will the hairs of my body stand on the end of the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he should remain so, even if slanders me roughly by his empress, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he's always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri 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 Kestakam Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in the matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1, to bless the devotee who's dedicated life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2, to consider names of demigods and Lord Shiva, Lord Brahman, to be equal to independent from them, Lord Vishnu. 3,
To disobey the orders of the spiritual master.
4,
To blaspheme the Vedic literature in pursuance to the Vedic version.
5,
To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna as the imagination.
6,
To give some interpretation of the holy name of the Lord.
7,
To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord.
8,
Consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are ordered in the life of karma kanda.
9,
To instruct the faithless person about the glories of the holy name.
and 10.
To not have complete faith in the chanting of holy names and to maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions in this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be a Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success, Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees that can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Vanchakalpa Turabhischa, Kripasindubhyebicha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha, Vaishnava Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 7, verse number 47, that we'll do again today. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Tinamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskati Dastarne Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Sabdo Nayatra Purukarakavan Krityarto. 47. Maya Parat Abhimuke Chavila Jamana. Huh? Yeah, we're doing it again.
But there's no that one. Saraswat? Yeah, 1 line.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let's see where it is. It's 2747. Huh? Yeah, well, that's not what I'm reading? Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm starting from... this has 6 lines in it. I was reading from the third line. Sasvat prasantam abhayam pratibodhamatram sudam samam sadasata paramatma tattvam sabdo nayatra purakara kavan kriyarto maya parat abhimuke chavila jamana tadvai padam bhagavata paramasya pumso prameti yad vidur asajasya sukham vishokam. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. What is realized as the absolute Brahman is full of unlimited bliss without grief. That is certainly the ultimate phase of the Supreme Enjoyer, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is eternally void of all disturbances and fearless. He is complete consciousness as opposed to matter, uncontaminated and without distinctions. He is the principal, primeval cause of all causes and effects, in whom there is no sacrifice for fruitive activities, and in whom the illusory energy does not stand. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, yesterday we covered about almost half of this purport. So I'll read the other half that we didn't cover. The Supreme Lord is the supreme soul of everything, and therefore, in the supreme conception, affection is realized. The conception of affection is due to the relationship of soul to soul. A father is affectionate to his son because there is some relationship of nearness between the son and the father. But that sort of affection in the material world is full of inebriety. When the personality of Godhead is met, the fullness of affection becomes manifested because of the reality of the affectionate relationship. He is not the object of affection by material tinges of body and mind, but he is the full, naked, uncontaminated object of affection for all living entities because he is the supersoul, or Paramatma, within everyone's heart. In the liberated state, one second, let's see. He is not the object of affection by material tinges of body and mind, but he is the full, naked, uncontaminated object of affection for all living entities because he is the supersoul, or Paramatma, within everyone's heart. In the liberated state of affairs, the full-fledged affection for the Lord is awakened. As such, there is an unlimited... Okay, I'm going to go a little slower then. Let's go back on this paragraph that I just read because there's some very important points. It says, the Supreme Lord is the supreme soul of everything. Well, yeah, that's a fact because he's present as Paramatma in the heart of everyone. So that would be called the supreme soul. And we are the small soul as an individual. And also, let's see what it says in the 8th chapter, 9th verse. What does it say? So here it says in the 8th chapter, 9th verse of Bhagavad Gita, it says, the Lord is so inconceivably small that he enters into the heart of this particle, meaning the jiva. So the jiva is already smaller than an atom, and Krishna is smaller than that, and he enters into the heart of the jiva. Therefore he is called smaller than the smallest. As the supreme, he can enter into the atom and into the heart of the smallest and control him as the supersoul. Although so small, he is still all-pervading and is maintaining everything. By him, all these planetary systems are sustained. We often wonder how these big planets are floating in the air. It is stated here that the Supreme Lord, by his inconceivable energy, is sustaining all these big planets and systems of galaxies. The word achintya, inconceivable, is very significant in this connection. God's energy is beyond our conception, beyond our thinking jurisdiction, and is therefore called inconceivable, achintya. Who can argue this point? He pervades this material world and yet is beyond it. We cannot comprehend even this material world, which is insignificant compared to the spiritual world. So how can we comprehend what is beyond? Achintya means that which is beyond this material world, that which our argument, logic, and philosophical speculation cannot touch, that which is inconceivable. Therefore, intelligent persons, avoiding useless argument and speculation, should accept what is stated in scriptures like the Vedas, Bhagavad Gita, and Srimad Bhagavatam, and follow the principles they set down. This will lead one to understanding. Amazing purport by Prabhupada, you see. And here it says that the Supreme Lord is the supreme soul of everything, and therefore, in the supreme conception, affection is realized. Okay, now he's going to counterpoint or compare what is real affection to the facsimile of affection in the material world. Now, this is important because we have to understand that the material world is a facsimile, reflection in darkness of the spiritual world, and is perverted. So therefore, what we're seeing here is not the real thing. It's suggested, just like a shadow, like my hand, if you look on this page here, because the light is up there, my hand is casting a shadow, right? Now the shadow indicates that there is a real hand somewhere, but the shadow itself is not the real hand. So if I try and shake hands with the shadow of a hand, it doesn't work. So what we're seeing here in this material is a shadow perverted reflection of what's in the spiritual world. So here now he's going to compare what is this supreme conception. In the supreme conception, affection is realized. So the supreme conception means whenever something is in relationship with Krishna, then we begin to see the real thing. The conception of affection is due to the relationship of soul to soul. But what's the relationship in the body? Is it soul to soul? No. It's body to body. Yes, so, therefore, it's not going to be the same thing as in the spiritual world. The conception of affection is due to the relationship of soul to soul. A father is affectionate to his son because there is some relationship of nearness between the son and the father. That's a physical nearness. Of course, the son is supplying food. The father is supplying food to the son, shelter to the son, and so-called education to the son, all these things. But that's like offering 2 tickets to the next Mariners football game. Mariners are football, right? Yeah. Huh? Oh, the Mariners are baseball. Yeah, so offering 2 tickets to the next Mariners baseball game to a guy that's drowning. You come up with a speedboat and say, hey, here's what you need here. He said, are you crazy? I don't need that. Don't give me that. I don't want that. I said, well, it's worth a lot of money. He said, no, I don't want that. Okay, I'll give you a post-dated check for $5 million. I said, I don't want that either. Well, what do you want? He said, just pick me up from this water here. I'm going to die if you don't. So he knows exactly what he needs there in that crucial moment where he's drowning, right? And no matter what other things they want to offer him, he doesn't want it. See? But under the state of illusion, we don't want liberation from the cycle of birth and death. We don't want eternal happiness. We don't want a spiritual body that's not subject to ignorance. We want ignorance. So therefore, the relationships in the material world, most of them are body to body. They're not soul to soul. Now, is this true? Someone says, "Oh no, that's not true." I love my mom or grandmom. It's a soul to soul thing. Is it? Okay, so let's see what Prabhupada's going to state here. A father is affectionate to his son because there is some relationship of nearness between a son and a father. But that sort of affection in the material world is full of inebriety. Now, what does this mean? Inebriety means drunkenness, right? It means being in a drunken or confused state of mind. That sort of affection to the material world is full of inebriety. Okay. When the personality of Godhead is met, the fullness of affection becomes manifested because of the reality of the affectionate relationship. Okay, now this is something that it takes time to understand. So most people say, wait a minute, I don't see the difference here. The nearness between the son and the father, but that sort of affection material is full of inebriety. What do you mean full of inebriety? I'm not a drunken person. I love my son, and my son loves me. So how can he say this? And then he says, when the personality of God is met, the fullness of affection becomes manifested because of the reality of the affectionate relationship. So what is that reality? That reality is Bhagavad Gita. Krishna, before Arjuna accepted him as his guru, they were having casual talks or intense talks also, but they were more casual, because Krishna wasn't saying, okay, now let's just listen to me now, stop speculating. He didn't say that. He listened to Arjuna. But after Arjuna accepted him as a guru, then all that casual talk went out the window, and now things became serious. So what's the difference? The difference is Krishna began to explain the fundamental misconception in the material world, and that is identifying the body as the self rather than the soul. So Krishna began to explain Atma Tattva to Arjuna when the discussion became serious, because without understanding the difference between the body and the soul, no one can make any spiritual advancement. So that inebriety is thinking, I am this body. That drunkenness, that confusion is thinking, I am this body. So, now, do people think I am this body? Almost everybody in the material world thinks I am this body. Just like, people say, oh, I am Indian, or, I am Mangala Indian, or I'm this or that, right? So they're identifying themselves like that. And that is drunkenness, that is inebriety, that is confusion, that is accepting ignorance for reality, right? So that's what he's talking about here. And it says, when the personality of God is met, the fullness of affection becomes manifested because of the reality of the affectionate relationship. Well, if someone teaches you how to stop suffering and attain an eternal body and go back to Godhead, believe me, that is real affection. So the other day, 2 weeks ago, I did a program in somebody's house, a Shrud ceremony, and the lady that invited me, she had invited her whole family. So that means people came from Arizona, people came from India, people came from New York. The whole family was there. She had a big family. I think she had 6 to 8 kids. Now, her husband died. The Shrud ceremony was for a husband who had died. And she continued to live in the house where all those kids grew up. Right? She didn't want to move. So anyway, when I was talking to the elder son who was doing the puja, I was telling him what to do. Later on, after everything was over, we were talking. And he said, I really love my father. It was a big loss for me when he died. I said, what did you love about your father? He said, the thing I remember the most, he said, was one day my father took me aside when I was, I think I was still in college. And he said, there are 2 most important things in life that no one can take away from you. And he said, one is education. He said, I came to this country. I didn't have much education. But I went to school in this country. I got an education. And because of that, I got a really good job. And I was able to buy this house. It's a nice house, right? And I was able to have a large family. And, so that one thing can't be taken away from me. And the second thing that can't be taken away from you is your family. So these are the 2 most important things in life. So I listened to him respectfully, and after he finished ventilating all the nonsense his father taught him, I told him, I said, well, both of those things you're going to lose. And what do you mean? Your father said you can't lose these things, right? They'll always stay with it. I said, but no. You lose both things. You lose your material education, and you lose your family. I said, what you cannot lose is your relationship with God, because He's eternal and you're eternal. But your relationship with your family, it's going to be lost. It could be lost before you die, or it could be lost at the moment of death. But either way, you're going to lose it. And your education also, because it's the material education. So you got a little flummoxed or confused when I said that, And I said, well, think about it. So the reason I was able to convince him was because before that he told me about his father's best friend. And his father's best friend was a minimalist. He never got married. He lived in a very small room. He had a very good job. He made a lot, but he gave most of it away. and always lived very frugally. And he was basically a brahmachari. He was a brahmachari. He never got married, and he never, played around. And he was a gentle person who decided to live very, very simply in the United States. And the father, who had a big family, had a big job, a lot of money. His best friend is this guy who's like basically a sadhu, right? An Indian guy, but basically a sadhu. I said, your father's friend proves what is factual. He said, what do you mean? I said, look, he was a minimalist. He wasn't like your father, who was, he was exuberant. He was expanding all the time. He purposely slowed down or stopped his expansion, and he lived a very simple life. And he gave away most of his money in his life, and he was, not interested in expansion. So the principle of expansion is Shri. Shri means a woman, because when you're married, when a man gets married, he expands. When he's not married, he usually lives much more simply. But as soon as he gets married, he expands because he wanted to make a family. So his father expanded, and this other guy didn't expand. And I said, see, that's an alternative way of living. And it's something that you're not going to lose if you use all that extra time and extra energy for spiritual life, which that man probably did to a certain extent. I'm not saying he was, I don't know him, but he at least he manifested minimalist living. So we see that when it says, when the personality of God is met, the fullness of affection becomes manifested because of the reality of the affectionate relationship. Well, the reality of affectionate relationship is the instruction that Krishna gave Arjuna, that awakened him, that illuminated his mind. It made him functional again. He was paralyzed, and he was violating his own culture. He was a Kshatriya. He was trained to be a Kshatriya. That was his natural position. And now he wanted to be some kind of a recluse, to live in the forest and eat a little bit of forest roots and fruits and be a renunciate, and that's complete nonsense. So he is not the object of affection by material tinges of the body. Look up that word tinge, T-I-N-G-E. Why does Prabhupada use that word? It's an amazing word in this context, a tinge. He says, he is not the object of affection by material tinges of body and mind. Because, he's basically ridiculing the material mind and the material body by using that word. So what does it say? What does it tinge?
Color slightly.
So it's not a full color, right? It's a very slight color. So it's a facsimile of the real thing, or it's a watered down, very watered down. See, huh? Tint. Yeah, just a little bit of something. So you see, he is, unless you look up the meanings of these words, you don't really understand what he's trying to say here. He is belittling to the extreme point the,
The inebriety word, it says inebriety.
Yeah.
It said
Inebriety.
habitual intoxication.
Yes, that's it. That means the whole life they're intoxicated, right?
It's not, yeah. Drunkenness is one meaning. Another meaning is like habitual intoxication.
Exactly. They're intoxicated by the bodily concept of life. The two things you can't lose. Your education and your family. That was his most profound statement after 60, 80 years of life, right? So this is like it is a tinge. It's a I would say denatured to the extreme point of what the truth is. Right? Yeah.
So that whatever the person said, right, his father said, education and family, right?
Yeah.
That is exactly what Krishna did when he brought the chariot in front of Bhishma and Drona. He said, these are this bodily attachment. One is his guru, right? His one who taught his education.
Yeah.
Another is his grandfather.
It's family.
Family. Actually, Acharyas explain, I think Vishwanath Thakur explains, that these are the two attachments the soul has.
Yeah, they're severe obstacles.
Very difficult until end of the life.
Now we don't see. Now you weren't here. I just want to read something. We're not belittling or condemning getting married. You have to look up in the 13th chapter. I'm going to read it again so we understand. We don't get a misunderstanding here. Because, someone will say, oh, man, Hari Vilas is giving lectures and really trashing the family. I'm not doing that. Here's what Prabhupada says. He says, He says, 13th chapter, verses 8 to 9, he says, as for detachment from children, wife, and home, it is not meant that one should have no feeling for these. They are natural objects of affection. But when they are not favorable to spiritual progress, then one should not be attached to them. The best process for making the home pleasant is Krishna consciousness. If one is in full Krishna consciousness, he can make his home very happy because this process of Krishna consciousness is very easy. One needn't only chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Accept the remnants of foodstuffs offered to Krishna, have some discussion on books like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and engage oneself in deity worship. These 4 things will make one happy. One should train the members of his family in this way. The family members can sit down morning and evening and chant together, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. If one can mold his family life in this way to develop Krishna consciousness, following these 4 principles, then there is no need to change from family life to renounced life. There it is. You see, we're not trashing the family. We're trashing the trashy family. Say, this tinge of so-called reality. It's nonsense. You see, it's full of nonsense. And this is something I'm going to talk about now. It's very interesting. How words have been denatured. How the meanings of words have been destroyed in modern times. So I'm going to give you one example. For example, wisdom. What is wisdom? If you look up in the dictionary, it says, wisdom is the synthesis of knowledge and experiences into insights that deepen one's understanding of relationships and the meaning of life. In other words, knowledge is a tool, and wisdom is the craft in which the tool is used. In contrast to knowledge, wisdom is generally considered to be morally good. Now, that sounds good, doesn't it? It sounds like, whoa, that's really nice. But actually, they're far away from the meaning of wisdom and knowledge, both. So, what is real knowledge? Well, we come back to this verse, 13th chapter, 8th to 12th verse, where it says, Adhyatma jnana nityatmam tattva jnanartam darshanam etaj jnanam iti proktam ajnanam yad atonyata. Real knowledge are the 18 points of knowledge enumerated or explained in depth in this verse, a series of verses 8 to 12, the 13th chapter. So it says that knowledge, the word for knowledge is jnana. What does jnana mean? Jnana means that someone understands the difference between the body and the soul, and then the difference between the individual soul and Paramatma, or super soul. That's what knowledge is. It's not learning about black history or the history of how Napoleon conquered and then was defeated. That's not knowledge. Real knowledge is understanding the difference between the soul and the body, and then between the individual soul and Krishna and super soul, and then understanding that Krishna is the origin of the entire spiritual world, the Paramatma, the Jivatma, the entire material world, and so forth. You learn the science of Krishna, how he encapsulates it all, as Virat Rupa, how he's present in every atom of the universe and in the heart of every living entity, and how his Brahma Jyoti is all pervasive in the spiritual world and the material world, and he's all pervasive in the material world also as Paramatma. This is what you have. This is called the science of Krishna. There's a lot more that has to be learned about it. It's in fact, we can never come to the end of all this knowledge about Krishna. You see, that's real knowledge. What they're saying here, it sounds good, but it's like impersonal. It's like impersonalism. See. Whereas the real definition of knowledge is completely personal. The difference between the body and the soul. That's personal. I got a body and I have a soul, right? Now, the scientists, they say there's no soul. Most scientists and philosophers, right? Let's take a look at that. There's a very interesting article about this. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, it's called Psychology Today. Right, and it's an article, a very well written article by a man called what's his name, Lanza. Okay, and he says new scientific theory recognizes life's spiritual dimension. Now, I'm not being ridiculed. I'm not ridiculing this article. Actually, this man that wrote it is very enlightened in many ways. He says, new scientist, but in this article he explains the scientists and false philosophers' concept about the soul and the body. So I'm just going to read that part. When he begins, he says, the reality of the soul is among the most important questions of life. Although religions go on and on about its existence, how do we know if souls really exist? A string of new scientific experiments helps answer this ancient spiritual question. It's a very interesting article. Right, but I'm going to skip over most of it. I just want to get to the part where he explains what's called this current scientific paradigm doesn't recognize the spiritual dimension of life. We're told we're just the activity of carbon and some proteins. We live a while and die. And the universe, it too has no meaning. It has all been worked out in the equations. No need for a soul. Okay? You see, he's explaining the science. Now, then he goes into what his work is. It's called biocentrism. But I'm not going to go into that. I want to read more because he characterizes the modern conception of the scientist of the soul in a very correct way. He says, but when the scientists speak of the soul, if at all, in other words, they hardly speak of the soul at all, right? But if they do, it's usually in materialistic context or treated as a poetic synonym for the mind. Synonym means a similar word, a different word, but it's similar to another word, right? It's usually in a materialistic context or treated as a poetic synonym for the mind. Everything knowable about the soul can be learned by studying the functioning of the brain. In their view, neuroscience is the only branch of scientific study relevant to the understanding of the soul. Traditionally, science has dismissed the soul as an object of human belief or reduced it to a psychological concept that shapes our cognition of the observable natural world. The terms life and death are thus nothing more than the common concepts of biological life and the biological death. The animating principle is simply the laws of chemistry and physics. You and all the poets and philosophers that ever lived are just dust orbiting the core of the Milky Way galaxy. Now, he's very elegant. I mean, he doesn't believe this himself. He thinks that there is a soul, right? But even his concept of the soul, though, I mean, I don't want to go deep into this, but here he has very well nailed, the modern scientific concept. If they talk about a soul, this is what they will say about it, nothing more, right? They dismiss it as being some nonsense, right? Some inebriety of less intelligent people like devotees. Okay, so this word knowledge, and now wisdom. Now, what is wisdom? They say the synthesis of knowledge and experiences into insights that deepen one's understanding of relationships and the meaning of life. See, this falls very, very short of what the real meaning is of wisdom and knowledge. We just explained what knowledge is, right? Now, wisdom, so you have knowledge, you have jnana and vijnana. Now, vijnana means you understand the relationship with Paramatma, and you understand that everything is coming from Krishna, right? And because of that, you become engaged in devotional service. That is wisdom. You see how far away these definitions are. See, and now I'm compiling a whole series of words that people use every day and examining the dictionary definition and showing that the dictionary definition is very, very far away from the real meaning of these words. And this is what's taught in school. This watered down definitions. Yeah, go ahead.
Krishna says, right, Agam Sarvasya Prabhu, right, Matta Pravatam Pravati, Matta Sarvam Pravati, Iti Matva Bhajantema, Buddha.
Bhava.
Buddha means wise person, Prabhupada says.
Yeah.
Prabhupada translated with Buddha word as a wise.
Yes. Wise person, yes.
That's wise means that's wisdom, right?
Yeah.
He worships Krishna.
Yes. See, you see how far away. This sounds nice. You read it, so, oh, that's really profound. It's not profound. It's misleading. It touches on some aspects, but not the essence. See? And this is the problem with modern dictionaries. That's why, what does Prabhupada do in his books? He defines things. This is what knowledge is. This is what wisdom is. This is what yoga is. You look up the definition of yoga, read it again. It's so ridiculous, their definition of yoga. It's like laughable. It's just full of incompleteness. What does it say?
The Hindu spiritual and ascetic discipline, a part of which...
By the way, is yoga Hindu? No, it's not a Hindu thing. Go ahead.
Including breath control, simple meditation, and adoption of specific bodily postures, is widely practiced for health and relaxation.
You see how far away the definition is? It completely denatures it, totally. And this is what kids learn. This would be, you look up in the dictionary, you want to see what yoga is, and then when they come here and they hear, yoga means connecting to Krishna, they think we're wrong. That we don't have it right, because it's not the definition in Merriam-Webster's dictionary or the Encyclopedia Britannica. You see, this is why people are confused. Now I'm going to go even further. Now you're going to be shocked by what you're going to hear now. This is a discussion that Prabhupada had with his devotees. He's speaking to Jayatirtha. And he says, Prabhupada, yes, propaganda. That is the cause of India's cultural fall down. Okay. These Britishers simply made propaganda that whatever you have got in India, this is all allegory, fiction. These Shastras are nothing. But now you are learning from us. England's work in India, that is your real knowledge. You are becoming civilized now because of us, because we're teaching you England's work. Otherwise, you are in the utopia, and all these Shastras, throw it out. Because, and this is Prabhupada speaking, right? Because that was Lord Macaulay's policy. Lord Macaulay was sent to report how Indians can be governed nicely. So he reported that if you keep the Indians as Indians, you will never be able to govern them, because they are superior. You make propaganda that they are inferior, and they will imitate you, and then you can dominate them. Prabhupada says that is what they did. Jayatirtha. The Indians would never be able to compete on the Britishers' platform. Prabhupada, no. It was under the British rule. From the childhood, children are subjected to the propaganda. We read one book, small book, by M. Ghosh. The subject matter was England's Work in India. That was a compulsory reading book in the schools. And in that book, it was simply stated that we are uncivilized, and since the Britishers have come, we are becoming civilized. It's an Indian that wrote it. This is the subject matter of that book. England's Work in India. That's the title of the book. I'm going to get that book and look at it. Right? So everything Indian is bad. The Jawaharlal is the typical example. Everything Indian is bad, he said. That was his philosophy. And this guy became the leader of India after Gandhi, right? Gandhi was trying to get the Indians back to the village. His philosophy was that these capitalists, they're exploiting these poor men. So all these poor men, they should go back to the village and be satisfied with the village economy, not to come out of the village. Actually, that's a very nice program. This Prabhupada is speaking like this. But as soon as Gandhi died or he was killed, the whole program was changed. Industrialization, and attract the poor man and let them live in wretched condition of city life. Gandhi's policy was to make them happy by agriculture in the village, produce their own cloth, not in the mill, but in the charkha. Jayatya says, spinning wheel? Yes, spinning wheel, Prabhupada says. They were spinning thread, simple life and moral life. No drinking of tea, no smoking, and Raghupati Raghava Raja Ram. This was his program, it's talking about Gandhi. Hindi-Muslim unity. But all these programs failed, and he died very dissatisfied. I've explained why they failed, and it's explained why because Gandhi was not a real sadhu. He was actually a politician, acting like a sadhu, you know. But anyway, that's another story. So Prabhupada, the Jayatya, why was it that the programs failed? Prabhupada, because his disciples, they had a different program, meaning Gandhi's disciples like Nehru, they had a different program. They wanted politics like the Western countries. They did not want Indian culture. Just like all the politicians, they do not want anything good for the people. Look what Prabhupada is saying. Like all the politicians, they don't want anything good for the people. He's right. He's absolutely right. They simply want to make money for their expenses. That's all. This is the whole policy of the modern diplomats and politicians. They do not know. You go to hell. Other way, in your country, you see, so many young men are frustrated. So he's talking about America, right? So many hippies, right? Prabhupada, no, it was under the, okay, so then later on he says, in another conversation, Harikesh asks a question of Prabhupada. He says, tomatoes don't grow in India. Prabhupada, no, it was imported. Because it was imported, Indians, upper classes, would not touch it. Those mill cloth, because they were imported, again, no gentleman would touch it. No religious function would allow to use mill-made cloth. And so far medicine is concerned, they would never touch it. This is the difficulty. Then Lord Macaulay sent a confidential report to his superiors in England that if you want to keep Indians as Indians, you'll never be able to do like that. Then they will gradually introduce, so in other words, he was saying, if you keep them as Indians, you'll never be able to dominate them. Whatever, then they should gradually introduce all this nonsense, drinking tea, drinking wine. You are, and convincing the young kids in India that you are uncivilized. Whatever British are doing, they are civilized. England's Work in India, this book. And they were given facilities, those who were English educated. In this way, they first of all tried to make the whole Indian population anglicized, but it was not possible. They didn't have enough men to do that because the population was too big. They wanted to anglicize everyone. it was not possible. At least those who were educated. So the so-called Indian educated, they took it seriously. Just like our Ban Maharaj. He was equal to the English way of life with fork and knife. Yes. He has taken it seriously. So Ban Maharaj was the number one disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta until he violated his mandate as a devotee. He's the one that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur sent to England and funded him for 4 years, sending 700 rupees at that time was a lot of money, and supported him to spread Krishna consciousness, and he didn't make one devotee in 4 years. And when he decided to give up, and he came back, and when he came down the plank of the boat, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was there waiting for him, and he came down and he basically told Bhaktisiddhanta, your process doesn't work, and walked away. Say, that's very insulting. So Prabhupada's talking about it. And I met Ban Maharaj. I actually met him, and he was a highly educated man, and he didn't like Prabhupada, but he couldn't deny that Prabhupada had spread the movement all over the world. I mean, that's another story. I won't go into it now. But so he says, just like our Ban Maharaj, see, what is he saying? That the British couldn't educate everybody. They didn't have enough teachers to educate everyone. Although everyone was being very well educated at that time by the Indian system, but they destroyed the Indian system. And therefore, a large mass of Indian young kids did not get educated for almost 100 years. And who did they educate? They educated the Brahmin kids because they could see that they were more intelligent, right? The Indian system was educating everyone before the British took it over. They destroyed it. And all of people in India were literate under their educational system. But after 100 years of the British system, by the 1930s, there was a huge number of poor kids that were illiterate, or middle class and poor kids. There wasn't any middle class. There was just poor kids. They were all illiterate. They were not being educated. Only the Brahmin kids were educated. This is why hatred of Brahmins grew up in India, whereas it did not exist before. But what happened was, because these Brahmin kids were being educated by the British way, they started infiltrating jobs that they never did before. And they started taking all the good-paying jobs, like government positions and things like that, and it created tremendous enmity, class enmity. It created this class, let's say, division of false class divisions. And therefore, you'll see in Kerala, Mangala, and Bengal, and Tamil Nadu, they hate Brahmins. People hate them. And Brahmins now are discriminated against. They can't even get jobs, like the good jobs, like the government job where you can sleep half the day and get a nice pension. They can't get those jobs anymore because the British ruined those kids for like 4 or 5 generations and made them into Britishers, right? And it's going on today. You'll see. I told you the story about that man who was who was taking care of Ananta Alvar's house in Tirupati. All his kids are in America in IT. None of them stayed in Tirupati. You know, they come maybe once or twice every 5 years or 6 years. Say, okay. So, and I'll finish this, and then we'll stop in a few minutes. Just like our Ban Maharaj equals English way of life with fork and knife. Yes, he has taken it seriously, taken English way of life seriously. He is under their impression or under their influence. Whatever is foreign, that is good. In this way, Indian culture was killed. The Mohammedans, they didn't have an idea like this. They wanted to rule over India, that's all. And the money was not all going out to the outside. They were spending lavishly in India. The money was kept in India. But these people, these British, they're dispersing all the money, the jewels, and everything valuable outside of India. So people became poverty-stricken. and culturally conquered. This is Prabhupada's explanation. Say the Britishers were ripping off India, stealing all the treasures of India, and India became known as a poor country, whereas before it was a rich country. How do we know it was a rich country? Everyone was trying to come to India. Marco Polo. Who was Columbus looking for? He was looking for a way to get to India, because that's where all the money was. That's where all the gold was. That's where all the opulence was, right? And in 100 years of British rule, they ruined it. It made India a beggar country. So by the 1930s, people thought of India as a beggar country. People, in the streets like that. See, what's Prabhupada is saying is, okay, the Muslims were brutal, but all they wanted to do was be in control. The British were much worse. They wanted to destroy the culture. Okay, the Muslims destroyed temples and forced many people to take to Islam. Okay, but the British, whatever was left of the culture, they wanted to destroy it completely, and they've succeeded. I was talking to a man yesterday who just came back from India at the farm, and he's a very nice man. And we were talking, and I explained to him, that you have to follow 4 rules. I mean, his wife said to me, "Well, I love Hinduism because there are no rules." I said, "That's not true." You see how ignorant people are, right? And these are very nice people. They're highly educated people. She tells me, in Hinduism, there's no rules, I said, "No, you're wrong." I said, there are 4, there are yamas and niyamas, And she was like looking at me a little puzzled, I said, the yamas are no meat eating, no gambling, no intoxication, no illicit philandering and sex and things like that. And then always chant the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna, and so forth. And always take prasadam, don't eat anything that's not prasadam. And always read the scriptures, Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and always come to the temple and do seva. I said, these are the rules. And I said, but you see, people in India, they think we're Hindu. There are no rules in Hinduism, so we can eat meat, and we can do this, and we can do. See, that's how much dumbed down the people are. And it's the fault of the Brahmanas. I'm telling you right now, it's the fault of the Brahmanas. They're more interested in just doing rituals to make money than to actually educate the people. What's education? It's these 18 points of education in the 13th chapter, 8 to 12, right? So, then Prabhupada says, the Muslims were spending lavishly in India. The money was in India. But these people, these Britishers, they were dispersing all the money, jewels, everything valuable outside India. So the people became poverty-stricken and culturally conquered. Okay. All right, so I'm going to stop right there. This goes on. It's very interesting to understand these things, because what does this man tell me when I said, no meat eating? And I looked at him and said, "Is this right?" He says, "I just came back from India." He says, "You're right. It seems as if Hinduism has accepted meat eating as a normal thing now. Many Hindus." And I told him a story about this Muslim man that I know here in Seattle, and he was bragging to me about how he and his wife host a shairi. A shairi is basically mixed Urdu Hindu poetry contest, where out of nowhere they choose a topic, and then a person has to come out and speak poetically, with rhyming and everything about that topic. And they don't know what the topic's going to be before they come. It's like a contest, right? So, Hindus and Muslims, usually do this in India. And so anyway, he said, many Hindus come to my shairi, and he was proud of that. I said, "Oh, that's good." He said, "But they don't really come for the shairi." I said, "Really? Why do they come?" He said, "My wife makes the most delicious kebab in the world. They come to eat the kebab." He was serious. He was serious, and it's a fact. They come to eat the kebab. It's not the shairi, it's the kebab that they come for. You know, and this man yesterday told me, you're right. He said, you know, most or many Hindus now, this meat eating has become mainstream in India. It's unbelievable. Okay, I'll stop right there. And we'll continue with this verse. Discuss some more points. Are there any questions?
In the further context of Ban Maharaj,
Yes.
why was his faith weak because of the 4-year failure? His faith was gone, or like?
No, way before that. He was educated in India. Ban Maharaj, you know, when I looked at him, he was on the same level as Aurobindo. Aurobindo was a Bengali. Ban Maharaj is Bengali also. He looked like Aurobindo, very refined face and clothing. He looked like a majestic person. Right? Huh? Yeah, he's aristocratic, right? And you could tell, you just look at him, you could say, this guy is special, right? And he was a #1 disciple of Bhaktivedanta Saraswati until that disaster, you know. And so what was your question?
Why, even though he's a #1, why he got failed?
He was educated in India by the British. He's highly educated, just like Aurobindo, a highly educated person. You know, very philosophical and you know, and see now, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was also highly educated, right? He was like the #1 astrologer, and he could speak English better than the Englishmen could speak it, right? You know, his use of in the English language was amazing. And that was the same with Aurobindo. They were not on the same level as Bhaktisiddhanta, but similar as far as material education goes. So that educational system corrupted them. Not Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, but these big men like Rabindranath Tagore and Ban Maharaj, Aurobindo, all of them got corrupted by this British education. And it went on for 100 years, more than 100 years, 120, 130 years until the British were kicked out. But it's still going on today. They adopted the British government system. And they still adopt it today. They adopted the British education system. It's still adopted today. It hasn't stopped. It's gotten worse. Oh, but you were educated in India. Did you learn anything about Vedic culture? No, they look down on it. They think it's fairy tales.
Whatever I learned little bit is from the home only.
Yeah.
So even though later he was trained by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, but the corruption was already there in the mind. So
Yeah.
the conviction wasn't.
See, the corruption is in our minds also. It's in my mind too. I was educated here, right? You're educated, and we have that corruption. But hearing this every day, little by little, that edifice of corruption is being destroyed in your mind. You know, and by hearing the real definition of words and comparing it to the false definitions, by hearing all this knowledge that Prabhupada is teaching us, little by little, all those misconceptions are being destroyed. But see, if a person doesn't accept to do this, it lingers on. Those misconceptions linger on. Even in devotees who chant Hare Krishna, but don't actually hear this every day. It's page by page, chapter by chapter. It won't go away. It won't go away. We should not let our kids go to these schools. They're dangerous. See, I'm going to read more tomorrow. You're going to get scared. You see how nefarious, how demoniac the British are. They were much more dangerous than the Mohammedans. The Mohammedans are dangerous, no doubt about it. What?
At least they are straight to the face.
Yeah. We don't like you. We hate you, and we want you all to be converted to Islam, and we're going to do it. It's just a matter of time. You know, we're going to outpopulate you one way. That's one way. You know, we're going to infiltrate everything. But the British, it got into the mind of the Hindus. It destroyed their faith in the Shastras. That's what they did. They said that the Shastra, this is uncivilized literature. They said it's the opposite. The British stuff, literature is all uncivilized. No, they were able to convince generations, not just one generation, a whole bunch of generations, and it's still going on. You see, and it's not going to stop until people start sitting down and hearing this on a daily basis. Haribol. Oh, where is the Srila Prabhupada?
It is very bewildering, Maharaj, that such elevated personalities, they walk out from Krishna consciousness. It's bewildering like too much. Because of the education.
Oh, I can tell you, I don't want to go into it now, but I mean, I met Damban Maharaj, and
You have to understand that that task was given for Prabhupada, so that's why you can say this is a Leela.
yeah.
So what was the difference, Maharaj, for Srila Prabhupada to get success and for Bon Maharaj to, see that?
Faith in the divinity.
I mean, for both.
No, I've explained it many times. I'll explain it tomorrow. All right? I'll explain it again tomorrow. In Prabhupada's own words. Haribol. Srila Prabhupada. See, this is what the sages in Naimishranya did for 1,000 years. They were listening to Srimad Bhagavatam for 1,000 years to figure out how to help the people in Kali Yuga.
Yeah.
And they decided that the best way to help them is through Srimad Bhagavatam.
If they tried to do by yagya, but it didn't work.
No.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Guru Charana Kevala Bhakti Sadma Rucharana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma Bando Moyi Savadana Mate Moyi Savadana Jaghara prasade bai e bhavatoriya jai. Jaghara prasade bai e bhavatoriya jai. Krishna prapti hoy jaha hoy te. Guru Moga Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Kya Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Kya Arana Koriyo Mane Asha Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati Rati Aise Uttama Gati Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha चक्षुदान दिल से जन्म जन्म प्रभु से दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो
प्रेम भक्ति जागा होते अविद्या विनाशा जाते वेदे गाय जघर चरी श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनर बंधु लोकेनाथ लोकेरा जीवाना लोकेरा जीवाना आह प्रभु कोरो दोया देखो मोरे पाद छाया ये बेजास कृषि त्रिभुवाना शीला प्रभुपाद पतित पावाना शीला प्रभुपाद पतित पावाना जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी इति नामिने नमः कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौर भक्त वृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram Ram Ram. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva. Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Anatana Frutti Vaishnavindi ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Sikoho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Samkunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhani ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Shri Mayapura Dham ki jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Tulasi Devi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Ganga Maya ki jai. Jamuna Maya ki jai. Samavera Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the symbol. All glories to the symbol. All glories to the symbol. Glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Patita Pavani ki jai. Namaste Saraswati Devi. The lotus feet of our spiritual master, the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. We bow down to this lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, across the ocean of eternal suffering, and obtain the mercy of Krishna. I only wish to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus feet. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all this. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with true knowledge. He is my Lord and Brother. From him ecstatic emanates. By him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, and the born Lord and Master. O Master, take mercy. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all 3 worlds. We take shelter in your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hari Bol.